Hello and welcome to I'm Listening, Stay Connected. I'm Listening is a 24/7, 365 initiative that works to destigmatize mental health. And that's why we're here. We want to give you some tips and some facts and also just let you know that we're here, we're listening. If you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at hashtag I'm Listening or by sliding into the DMs on our Loveline IG page. We've got a great show planned for you tonight. We have Lisa Guerrero. She is an investigative journalist. You're all familiar with her work. And of course, Dr. Jen Wider, our medical expert, to be unpacking some of the current news. There's a lot of things that are constantly coming out, and we want to get Dr. Wider's perspective on that. Now, I wanted to start the show by talking about something that might not be familiar to a lot of us, but as I've said on prior shows, the longer that we're in self-isolation, there's going to be a lot of new mental health struggles and syndromes that we haven't heard before, or more importantly, aren't familiar to us. You know, the old baseline of mental health functioning is different for all of us. And that's what's really interesting for me as a mental health professional, is that for the first time, I'm experiencing the exact same things that the patients that are in my practice and everyone else is experiencing. None of us are untouched from some of the triggers and anxieties and worries that are globally happening. I mean, talk about collective consciousness. We are deeply in it. So I want to talk about this word called compassion fatigue. Now, what it really talks about is how we're familiar culturally with physical fatigue. You know in your body when you're tired because you've expended far too much physical energy, whether that's due to office responsibilities, work responsibilities, working out, whatever it is. But we don't often talk about the emotional fatigue that can occur when we're constantly emotionally available or helping out others. In most people's daily lives, it might only come up when they're talking to a partner, a family member, a child perhaps, even an employee, and it's rare. But now that we're self-isolating and people are following the rules and they're reaching out and they're trying to connect with others, I think it's something that people are going to get more familiar with. So what exactly does that look like for us? Well, there's this term and concept that is really beautiful, and I think it is a great metaphor, and it comes out of the disability rights movement, and it's called spoons. Basically, what it means is that all of us start the day with different levels of available energy. And how much energy we have for the day ahead of us is going to be different for everyone, and that's going to be based upon genetics, other psycho-emotional factors, other responsibilities, the way that they're tolerating what's happening around them. But the whole purpose of it is just to recognize that we only have so much emotional energy to get through our day. And we don't want to burn ourselves out by making ourselves available to every single human being that might need to connect with us. Now, having said that, I want us to be as available as possible because we're all in this together. And when someone reaches out to you, it's most likely because they're feeling dysregulated, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling alone. And I want us to be a resource. But I also want us to realize that we have a full day to get through emotionally. And so the news that we're encountering, things on social media, family members we're self-isolating with, people that are reaching out, those are going to deplete us. So we have to be thoughtful about where we're putting our emotional energy so as to not burn out and get what we're calling compassion fatigue. So the first thing is you don't have to be overly available. Be available to levels that are comfortable for you. I want us to extend ourselves and be there for others, but complete availability around the clock is definitely going to burn you out. Also, now's a time to practice saying no. It's okay if someone's reaching out and they want to process something related to COVID-19 or an emotional struggle that you maybe say to them, now's not a good time. Can you call back later? Could you call back tomorrow? Or I'm just feeling really depleted and triggered myself. This isn't something I'm available for. Can you reach out to another loved one? Setting limits. That's going to really protect us and prevent this from overwhelming us. And also just taking full time away. One of the most beautiful things I see myself practicing is sometimes turning off my phone, flipping it over, and letting hours go by where I'm not available to anyone or anything because I'm focusing on self-care and preservation. Knowing all the responsibilities I might have physically and emotionally ahead of me, I take time away whenever I can to really rebuild those resources. So if you know you have a full day with the family or the children, or you have to go grocery shopping, or you know you have a phone call with a very stressed family member, make sure you're thinking throughout the day about how we have limited amounts of emotional energy to give, and really be thoughtful about where you direct that. Because again, we want to be available to those around us. People are reaching out that we haven't heard from in a long time, and that's a really beautiful thing. Again, I want us to extend ourselves because part of how we're going to get get through this without a massive level of traumatization and high rates of depression is by staying connected, finding joy and humor. But again, we do want to keep checking in with ourselves and making sure that we're not burning ourselves out to a point of not being available to some of the other needs and responsibilities that we have. We have a lot coming at us. It's work, it's family members. And so we just want to be really thoughtful, again, about where we direct our time and attention. So if you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at #I'mListening, or again, by sliding your questions into the DMs on our Loveline IG page. We'll be answering those throughout the show and on future shows. So you can always send your questions. But right now, let's go to Lisa Guerrero, investigative journalist. Lisa, are you there?
Hi,
welcome to the show.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I loved your opening segment there. I 100% agree with everything you were saying about having to put limits on our time and our emotion and our energy right now, and learning to say no to some things in order to preserve yourself and your energy for tomorrow. Great segment. Great advice.
And it's so foreign to some of us. A lot of us are used to leaving our homes or certain environments to go to work, to go to the gym, to go for a walk. And so it's really fascinating to not have those available.
Yeah, amazing.
So I always like to start up by asking, how is your mental health right now?
I thank you for asking me that. I have been really lucky, blessed, and fortunate to have a job that I care about, that I'm still able to do. Our show, Inside Edition, did not go down during the first couple of weeks of the coronavirus pandemic, as a lot of other shows in syndication did. So we remained on the air every day, and I began doing daily general assignment stories about COVID-19 and the ramifications on human beings and families and small businesses, different angles of the story. And so I was able to every day know that I had a reason to wake up, a kind of a target schedule, because our show feeds at 12 noon in Los Angeles, where I live. And then I would go home and shelter at home and take care of, my house and the people around me that I love. So I was lucky that my job was still intact, although it was different. Now I'm not traveling all over the country chasing bad guys as an investigative reporter. My job kind of shifted gears into doing general assignment stories. But I have been kind of, lucky in as far as I've been able to have the best of both worlds. Haven't lost my job, been able to do my job a little bit differently, but still I've been staying safe and staying at home after I get home and taking care of the people I love.
From a mental health perspective, I'm really glad to hear that. I think what you pointed out is what some people I know I'm working with clinically are struggling with, which is their day has no structure. They have no meaning or purpose. They have time creep where they're floating through the day. There's no benchmarks letting them know breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I know from me as well, from my mental health, what's been most valuable is also having something to do.
Yes. Well, that's one of the reasons that I love working for Inside Edition, is that every day we're working on different angles of this story. And we have covered the fact that alcohol sales have spiked in the United States by 55%, that people that normally had addiction issues aren't able to go to their groups because AA meetings are no longer available in person. They've now shifted online. My uncle is a psychiatrist out of Detroit, and he has, talked to me also about issues with his patients and how they really have to shift. They've had to shift gears and care for their patients online, which is really difficult for a lot of people. So we've been covering those stories as well. And again, we've never seen anything like this. I have talked to young people that are fans of our show and watch our show on YouTube to be journaling, whether that's, through videos or through written accounts, to be journaling about how they feel and what they see around them, because we are living in unprecedented times right now. And it's important for young people to feel like their voice and their experience matters. And so I think that's a message we could all use, is to really take this time to document what we're feeling, what we're seeing, what we're going through, because hopefully we will never see something quite like this again.
Yeah, I love that because again, I want people talking about their mental health, and that's what I kind of heard you saying in that as well. Is they're documenting, and in the documentation, journaling, they're processing, so they're paying attention to and centering. But let's talk for a second about the alcohol thing. 55%. That's a concern I have, not just for the people that struggle with alcoholism, but what might come out of this. Because I'm watching people post their drinking starting at like noon, 3 p.m., 4 p.m. It's becoming a really prioritized and legitimized coping mechanism.
It is. And look, there's kind of two categories of people that are posting things on Twitter and Instagram about this. There's a category of people that realize I'm probably drinking more than I normally do. And they're trying to make light of it. And their coping mechanism is to tease each other and to tease ourselves about it. There's another category of people that might not understand or might not even acknowledge that they're drinking more, are drinking starting earlier in the day and later into the evening because there's no reason to go to bed early because you're not waking up to go to work. And, you know, in my opinion, I think it's kind of healthy to at least acknowledge it if that's what you're doing and to put some light on it, because the worst possible thing is to be, moving into a pattern that you don't realize that you're doing and you're not recognizing it and you're not confronting it, even with humor. And I think that's where social media can be really helpful. I have been able to reach out to a couple of my friends that I saw were posting a lot of things like that on social media. So I made a couple phone calls saying, hey, how are you feeling? I've noticed you're posting a lot of this. Are you drinking more than usual? Are you smoking more than usual? A lot of us are eating a lot more than we need to right now. And, of course, we make jokes about it. The COVID-15, the coronavirus, the quarantine 15. I think that's a coping mechanism that we're using to use humor to identify that we're doing this and to also let other people know that we're doing it because it's a shared process for a lot of people. And that's okay. What I worry about are the people that are doing that and not acknowledging that they're doing that.
Wow, beautiful. Again, I love what you're saying. Bring a consciousness to the coping mechanisms you're choosing. Because what I'd also would hope would come from that is the recognition that maybe this one time I'll choose something else. Maybe the recognition that I have other options in that moment versus going right to the alcohol, kind of like diversifying that a little bit.
Yes. And what's really interesting is even though I'm an investigative reporter, I'm also a crafter. I do DIY projects all the time. I do mosaics. And so I've been, that's my coping mechanism for having a very dangerous, difficult job. It's grueling. I'm usually on the road all the time. I come home and I go in my art studio and I break glass and I make these mosaic projects. So right now I'm seeing that I'm doing a lot more of that. It's my coping mechanism, right? And even though I'm not out in the field, across the country doing investigations, I'm still out of my home doing general assignment stories in a very stressful environment where I think all the time, am I going to get sick? Is this microphone clean? We're using boom mics. We're trying to wipe down everything. But I come home every day. I take off my clothes, throw them right in the wash. I take off my shoes at the door, disinfect everything. But I'm constantly worried about getting sick. And so my coping mechanism has been to go into my art studio and to create something. That's really been positive and it's helped me a lot. And I'm doing a lot of projects that were kind of on the back burner. They're now on the front burner. I'm doing them.
Ah, that's so beautiful. So let me ask you quickly about the field of journalism. I know that it's changed a little bit topically because there's so much to cover that's centered around COVID-19. Do you think that this is going to have a longer future-oriented shift in journalism as a whole?
100%. I think we're going to be looking at a couple of things differently. Number one is how we are able to gather and then disseminate news, meaning just what we're doing right now, Dr. Chris, talking on the phone via Skype. And this is an interview that typically in regular network broadcasting, we didn't do a lot of before, because maybe the quality wasn't HD quality. And, you like to get people one-on-one right in front of each other. But what we're finding out now is that we can have these really deep, impactful conversations using technology. You don't have to fly somebody in from across the country to do a sit-down interview with them anymore. So I think the way we're going to gather information, the way we're going to do interviews is going to be different. The way that we really think about, am I being safe physically? Am I wiping everything down? Am I making sure that, I was a hugger. This is hard for me. I'm Latina. I come from a culture where we hug everybody. Unfortunately, I think that's going to have to shift. The way I do business and the way I communicate is very physical with people. And now I am going to have to take a step back and think, of their safety as well as my safety. And, we're just going to be doing things differently. Now, in terms of the actual content for the news, yes, this is absolutely going to change everything, because we're not going to go back to normal, people. And I know my friends have said, Lisa, I guess they think since I'm a journalist, I have some inside track on things. When are things going to get back to normal? Things will never get back to normal the way that we knew them before. We're going to have a new normal. Things are going to be different. They just are. They have to be, because this pandemic is a pandemic. It's not the only pandemic, right? There are going to be other viruses that we are going to be gaining all kinds of knowledge about how these things are spread through different types of contacts. And we're doing that now. We're learning our knowledge shifts not just every day, but every hour. So we're learning more and more about this particular pandemic, but we're learning more about health in general and how we spread things. And I think this is going to be a really interesting subject for long form journalists down the road. But the final thing I want to say is, because I'm an investigative reporter, I'm going to have so much material in the next 18 months about, the amount of scams and the amount of hurt and the amount of stories out there where people are hurting and taking advantage of vulnerable people. We're going to have accountability journalism to talk about. We're going to have to follow the money, follow the timeline, why things happened when they happened, why there weren't safety nets in place, where is the money going from this $1 trillion safety net. We are going to be having a lot of conversations in the investigative journalism field, and those are going to be important conversations. So you're going to see a lot of shifts in the news in the next 2 years.
It's interesting you say that, because I just know on a micro level, I'm watching different friends and people I know getting scammed just trying to purchase like gym equipment off an online site that isn't a real site. So I'm seeing like the micro level. And so I can only imagine the macro. And it's heartbreaking. Right now, it makes me so sad that people are trying to cash in on any way they can scam someone when we're all at our most vulnerable and we're trying to get access to needed resources to like survive or maintain our mental health. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and you see that, I covered Superstorm Sandy. I've covered the wildfires in Malibu. I've covered a lot of natural disasters, tornadoes, and you always see that during a disaster or in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, there's always somebody trying to make a buck. And there's always groups, organizations, politicians that are there not to help people, but to line their own pockets, or to gain power in a new power structure if there's a vacuum in a power structure. So you see a lot of that. And who I worry about are the vulnerable, right? I got into investigative journalism because I care about social justice and I care about the underdogs. And those are people that are most affected by any kind of disaster. And those are people of color, senior citizens, women, the vulnerable, people that are low income, animals. There are, like I said, there are going to be at least 2 years worth of investigative stories just based on this last 4 weeks.
Heartbreaking. Lisa, I'd love for you to answer some tweets that came in with me.
Sure, of course.
The first tweet asks, what role do you think the media has played in the pandemic? Do you think things have been over or underplayed? That's a good one.
I think that, I'm glad you asked that. First of all, that's a great question. Of course, I'm a member of the media. I am also a news junkie. So I'm constantly watching CNN, MSNBC, all of the networks. And I have my ear to the ground with other journalists to see what they're covering and how they're covering it, from local to regional to national news and even international news, because this is a global pandemic. Overall, I think the media has done a fantastic job of covering a story that is a moving target, meaning the story, as I mentioned before, changes hour to hour. So what we were reporting on yesterday, based on the facts that we thought we knew yesterday, may have shifted today because there's new information. I think that overall journalists have done an excellent job in keeping up with the story, chasing the story, shifting gears in terms of their questions, and holding powerful people accountable. All you can do as a journalist is ask the question. You can't control the subject's answer back to you. You can't control how they react. If they lie to you, if they run away from you, if they stick their lawyers on you, you can't control the answer, but we can control our questions. So it's up to us to keep asking tough questions and to hold powerful people accountable. And I think that journalism overall has been doing its job. Journalists have been doing their job for the most part. Now, I don't count Fox News in that category because there was some misinformation that they were giving people early on that was incredibly tragic. It hurt people. And I think that, when you purposefully give people misinformation because of a political agenda either way, that is not what journalism should be about.
Yeah, because there's victims. Us as lay people are counting. It's like the trust factor. We're trusting what the journalists are telling us because we don't have direct access to the resources you do. And so, yeah, if people are purposefully giving out misinformation, we're victimized by that. So, yeah, beautifully said. I can't even imagine what it's like to work in this current time when, like you said, hour by hour, the facts change and you're constantly pivoting, reversing what was said. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in that, though. We have another question. This one's kind of interesting. This one asks, Lisa, because you are a journalist, do people ever attack you personally for the news or stories you are reporting on? How does that impact your own mental health when you're being objective?
Oh, that is another great question. Oh my goodness. Well, yes, because I do investigative journalism, that means that I'm constantly in an environment where I am asking tough questions of people that have been accused of scamming people, hurting animals, abusing people, even, suspected murderers. We've done cold cases. So I'm constantly in a position where I'm asking tough questions of people that don't want to answer those questions. So their circle of people, their friends, their family members, their network of folks, they obviously don't like me doing those stories. And because of social media, you can find me easily. And I want it that way because I want people to give me story ideas, and I want your feedback about what I'm doing. I'm constantly trying to keep in touch with our viewers. I'm at for Lisa Guerrero everywhere. But because I'm so kind of public and I'm out there and I'm on social media, I do get a lot of death threats, rape threats, and general nastiness from people that don't like the stories I cover, or they're related to somebody who's the subject matter of one of my stories. So yeah, that kind of comes with the territory. I think that the difference is that I'm a woman. So my predecessor, the guy that did our investigations for years before me, Matt Mahar, he may have, been threatened in real life, but he wasn't on social media. That was those days before Twitter, and he was a man. Well, I'm on social media and I'm a woman. And so I kind of get the double-barreled, fake news, the press is the enemy, and also you're a woman. And so I'm going to, throw this other misogynistic angle at you as well. So yeah, I do, I worry about that. My dad worries for me. My friends worry for me. I am so thankful that so far, knock on wood, I have felt really balanced about it, because I know that's my job. And if people are angry at what they see on TV, that's not me personally. They may be angry at a story I'm delivering or the fact that their friend or colleague is the subject of it, but they don't know me personally. So I try not to take that stuff personally. Like I said before, Dr. Chris, I use art to balance my existence. I write lyrics to songs. I have a country music song that's climbing the chart right now, which is crazy. But I try to use my artistic part of my personality to offset that negativity. And that's what allows me to go to sleep every night and sleep soundly and be able to get up again and do the same thing.
And I applaud you, because as someone who's also social justice oriented, I've gotten some pushback, but as a white man, it's nowhere near what you must get yourself. So thank you for all that you're doing, truly. And thank you for being a part of our show tonight.
You're well. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you about these really important issues right now.
Yeah. Stay safe. Okay. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye. So yeah, I mean, that's what's so fascinating, is there's so much happening, so much changing, that, even here with I'm Listening, Stay Connected, we're trying to give you up-to-date facts and information, give you the tips that are going to really help you weather all that's coming at you. This is such an unprecedented time. And I always center mental health, and it's really hard to get the information we need to get while also focusing on mental health, because sometimes they're at odds. Just like when we talk about social isolation, it's imperative that we are limiting our exposure to other people while also honoring that as human beings, our mental health is literally dependent upon our time and engagement with others. So all the solutions are not always ideal, but we're doing the best we can. If you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at #I'mListening or by putting your questions into our Loveline DMs. I'm going to answer a quick tweet that I got. This one asks, my company is not allowing me to return to work after I took a mental health leave following the death of my parents. How can companies get away with that? How can I prove that I'm mentally sound enough to return? That's a funky question. I honestly think that that's something you really want to take up with the HR department. If you have a therapist, they can absolutely talk about your mental health status, and they can try to provide whatever documentation that speaks to your current mental functioning. But questions like that sometimes fall more under an HR question, where HR can talk to you about what the company rules are and also really advocate for you returning to work. I know that right now, more than ever, people are really struggling financially. And so I can't imagine the heightened level of stress and anxiety around not working right now. Here's another tweet. And this one asks, I was let go from my job, but they keep reaching out to me about various things, and it's frustrating. How do I set boundaries around this? I think it's a both end situation. I know that a lot of individuals still want to be seen as available to work for a company or for employment. And so we're having to kind of extend ourselves in ways we haven't in the past, so as to still be productive, still be seen as a team player. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. We don't want to completely burn bridges and walk away from employment opportunities that were available historically and will be available again in the future. So I'm working with a lot of individuals that are doing what they need to do to still be part of a team. And kind of like what Lisa was saying, and it was really a stunning point, we really want to find meaning and value in our time. And so for a lot of individuals, having whatever work they can stumble into is a really powerful way for them to distract themselves and find purpose and meaning. Because again, if we're just drifting through our day with no benchmarks, nothing we need to do, that's really when we start to misuse coping mechanisms and really kind of fall into some levels of depression. All right now let's switch gears and go to Dr. Jen Wider, our medical expert. Dr. Jen, how are you?
Hi, Dr. Chris. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. Before we get into anything, how was your mental health? How are you doing?
I'm good. I mean, I'm trying to remain optimistic. I'm definitely taking a lot of your tips. I think it's a difficult time. I have my husband is working actively in the hospital doing surgical procedures on COVID-19 patients. So that adds a bit of stress for our family. But like everybody else, you're trying to remain optimistic. I have 3 children at home, and, trying to have structure, as you said, trying to have a sense of purpose in the day to try to keep them on track. And just having that, with the kids, between the kids and my husband, it's been, it keeps me busy enough to try to maintain a regimen and try to maintain a sense of structure in the day.
And I'm looking at you, you're sitting there smiling. Mother of 3, your husband's off work at the hospital. I cannot imagine how you're doing it all, truly. And smile. Bless. Sending love to you. So just to share your thoughts on some of the new things that we're hearing. Let's just start with the fact that in South Korea, they're reporting on some recovered patients are testing positive again after recovering.
Yeah, this falls under the sort of really scary, like apocalyptic, zombie apocalypse kind of news, where we're concerned that, patients that have recovered from this disease could potentially, now the disease is either reactivated or they're becoming infectious again. there are a lot of these cases now that are popping up. Originally, weeks ago when the disease was confined in Asia, Chris, there was one case of a Japanese woman who had disease. She had tested negative, and then her test became positive after several weeks. I had interviewed this virologist at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City who told me that it was likely that the test actually tested, a false negative, but she'll continue to test positive for several weeks afterwards. There are a lot of viruses like measles where some people will continue to test positive for the disease, even though they're quote unquote clear of the disease. So that may be one reason why these people are testing positive again. It could be the fault of a false negative test that tested negative originally, and now they're positive. Another another possibility would be that the disease remained dormant in some of these people's systems and then became reactivated for whatever reason. But right now in the literature, the good news is that these people that were testing positive then became negative and the disease was reactivated. No one has caught the disease again from them. This disease is not contagious in the reactivation stage. So the issue is, Chris, a lot of this is confusing, I think, to the lay people and to other people that are paying attention to this in the public health world, because there's a lot of information pouring in at different times. You see a lot of data coming in from China and Japan. You see case studies coming in from the United States, from Italy. And there's so much new data that we don't have the time to collate it and to make widespread decisions on what exactly is going on. But if you speak to infectious disease specialists and virologists, it will be one of those two things, either a reactivation of a dormant disease or a false negative that, again, will test positive. The good news, again, the reassuring part of this is that people are not passing along that disease in that second, testing positive after you were tested negative.
Okay, and thank you for clarifying that, because I'm seeing some people reposting that article and they're not reading it or asking questions. They're just going off the salacious headline. And like you said,
Yes.
It's feeling a little zombie apocalyptic. Yes.
It is. And of course, remember, one of the really things that to ground ourselves, and it's good for our mental health, is to recognize that one of the more probable treatments right now is something called convalescent plasma treatment. They're doing a lot of trials on this. They're taking the antibodies from people that have recovered from this disease, and they're transfusing them into people that are very sick with the disease. And that convalescent plasma therapy has antibodies that were produced by the immune system of people that have survived this, that are doing fine, that their body immune system reacted and made antibodies. The good news is those antibodies are giving a boost to a lot of the patients that are receiving those transfusions. And I think that this is one of those therapies that actually we're going to see down the line that really works and can be used over and over again. It was used, this convalescent plasma therapy, Chris, was used back in the 1918 Spanish flu. It's an old therapy, obviously, taking antibodies from people's blood and putting them into other people that haven't seen the disease yet. But why I mentioned this is because those antibodies confer a sense of immunity. That therapy would not work unless those antibodies gave immunity. It's the reasoning behind our vaccines. And so we can take solace in the fact that people that are exposed to this most likely will have immunity to this disease. And it's not like this is an alien disease, Chris. We've seen coronaviruses before. It's not like this has come from outer space. It most likely will react and behave the way other respiratory viruses, other coronaviruses did. And hopefully we can just get ahead of that curve and start to bring forth therapies that work and diagnostic testing in a widespread scale.
Okay, so I heard some positivity in that. Thank you. I think we need to hear some good news sometimes. And then just talk briefly about the whole possibility of needing to wear gloves. Because again, I watch how every now and then they keep amping up the level of protection we need. Now we're all being mandated to wear masks. I think that's awesome. Should we now be wearing gloves?
This is another really good point that you're making, Chris. There's a lot of confusion among consumers and the lay population, because originally the CDC said wearing masks for the lay population was not necessary. I think the Surgeon General probably should have been a little bit more transparent with the fact that people were hoarding these N95 respirator masks that are really appropriate for our first line responders, people that are in the hospital, people that are in the ERs and the ICU, the nurses, the doctors, the physical therapists, all of these types of people. And the information came directly from the CDC and from the Surgeon General. And now we're a little bit confused because now we're told we all need to wear masks. The same thing is happening with gloves, right? So we hear a lot of doctors, and I've interviewed many, many doctors that are working in ICUs and ERs, telling people when they go shop that it's wise to put on a pair of gloves, because oftentimes if somebody who may not realize they're sick is shopping next to you and sneezes or coughs on produce, then you can pick it up from a surface. And if you have gloves on your hands, you're somewhat protected. Of course, there are a lot of other people saying that, I looked at the statistic, about 10 to 15% of the time, if we're wearing gloves, we will infect ourselves, right? So whatever's on the glove, if we're not careful, we can infect ourselves with whatever is on the surface of the glove. And people are saying it's better to go and shop and then to wash your hands diligently. To tell you what I'm doing, because everyone's going to give you a different sense, I feel safer with gloves. I feel like it distracts me from touching my face. I feel like I'm putting in careful protocols when removing my gloves. That's incredibly important. You don't want to get a false sense of security if you're wearing gloves, that all of a sudden you're in a market and then you get a phone call and you take off the glove, you touch your screen, then you put the glove back on and you assume that, your screen isn't contaminated or your gloved hand isn't contaminated. So you have to be very careful with these protocols. But really the take home message is, I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear mongering in the press. I think it's very important to do what you feel you're comfortable with. If you are wearing gloves, just make sure you dispose of them properly. A lot of doctors that I spoke to about even pumping gas recommend wearing gloves. Even if you don't have disposable gloves, you can wear a pair of ski gloves and then throw them in the wash when you're done. But we've heard that this virus can live on different surfaces. So in my opinion, and in my own practice, I will be wearing gloves if I go to a market or if I pump gas.
Okay, thank you for that. And we have a tweet, and I'd love to hear your thought on this, because this is something that I heard brought up a couple times, and we haven't unpacked it all on the show. This this question asks, as a pregnant woman who is due in May, I have so much anxiety around giving birth in a hospital during the pandemic. What if my baby is exposed to the virus in the hospital setting? How do I find peace of mind at this time?
Listen, this is absolutely a nerve-wracking time. It's a nerve-wracking time for mothers. It's a nerve-wracking time for women who are pregnant. And the hospitals are really taking this very seriously in labor and delivery. I've interviewed different OBGYNs, especially in New York City, where, you're seeing a very large spike of this disease over the last few weeks, and they've restricted any visitors from coming in, including partners. Women are going in on their own and they're giving birth. And the labor and delivery floor is very, very protected. They're taking all sorts of, you have to rely on your healthcare workers to take all sorts of precautions in order to bring life into this world, to make sure that it's safe for both the mother and the baby. The good news, Chris, is that in this disease, the people that are still most at risk statistically are older people and people with pre-existing conditions. We have all seen cases where newborns have had it. There are pregnant women who have had coronavirus. None of us are immune from this, but the people that are more likely to get complications and to have serious disease remain the people that are elderly and those with pre-existing conditions. So God forbid a baby were to contract this, or a pregnant woman were to contract this, you're in good hands in the hospital, and they are looking for this. They're practicing their best practices, their hygiene, their sterility on these floors, and they're doing the best they can. And there have been a lot of successful births. Life doesn't stop. So there have been a lot of successful and healthy births during this time, and it will continue to be so as long as our, OBGYNs and our labor delivery floors have the right protective equipment.
Beautiful. Dr. Jen Weider, thank you as always. And I like that we got some good news in there a little bit tonight. Stay safe and have a great night.
You too.
This is again such an interesting time, and we're all doing the best we can. There's always new information coming at us, so it's all about the level of precaution that you feel like you need to take based on the life that you're leading. If you have any questions for us, though, please tweet them at #I'mListening or slide them into our Loveline DMs. We'll be answering those throughout the week. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can check out the show, though, if you missed any of it, on all of radio.com's handles. What is that? Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Thanks for hanging out with us, and y'all have an awesome, awesome night.